Okay. All right. So
I've got your information if you want. The original Tilson study was a part of the Economic Development Committee. Jackie Hewitt was the name on the agreement, and the cost was $22,000.
wow.
That was the original study that came in with about fiber linking up to the community. So that was what the scope of that one was. It was 22,000.
Okay.
That was done what, about 8 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say God, well, it had to be at least 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Quite a while.
It was finished in 2015 because they're final.
Okay, so it was only 6 years ago. Okay. Seemed like we'd started earlier than that, but that's fine.
Kendra, Joe, are you familiar with their software for community engagement?
Not as familiar with what they're currently working with. I would say that the level of involvement that they usually have is, they're looking at doing a majority of the work with minimal assistance from a committee versus a consultant or committee that is actively doing that engagement process. And I think it's just worth thinking as a committee what your own capacity is for community engagement, and how your community moves forward projects or decisions based on where that community engagement comes from. So one thing that we just recommend to committees especially is, if you have the capacity, it's always nice to be starting your community engagement process from the committee level. Your residents, you can you have a better footing with your neighbors and with your community than maybe an outside consulting firm coming in. I don't know Tilson's negotiation around specifically community engagement and what they're able to balance between a committee and otherwise, but typically when we see a price point this high in similar consultants, it's because they are fully taking over that process. And typically that looks a little bit different than a committee that has been kind of boots on the ground doing that, having those conversations, holding their own meetings, informational sessions, and reaching out to their neighbors. So.
And does this group feel like we can do things ourselves without just bringing in an outside firm and paying to manage the whole thing? Because we do know that community engagement is going to be key to everything. We need to, and we should start that process, but.
Right. Might be worth having some discussion at the upcoming town meeting. I don't know if that's an appropriate forum to get a pulse on what people are feeling about such a project. Derlin, I don't know if that's an appropriate format for that, or if it would be better off.
I think probably not the town meeting, as we don't have a warrant article on it, and we're going to be in the parking lot. We've got a hell of an agenda going through, so I would not recommend the town meeting as a very viable source this year, Wendell.
Okay. Yeah.
It could at least be advertised that stay tuned, something is coming, so people aren't surprised. Not to go through not ask for any feedback, but to say, hey, we're interested in the following area, and we might be sending out postcards or communicating in some way.
You probably get more response. You'll reach more people on the web page and Facebook page. You probably get 60 people at the town meeting as opposed to 1,000 or more would see it on the others. So.
Right. I think Kathy has a nice letter that's going to be in the town report, I think, too.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
People read it.
Does your community have an active Facebook page?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, sometimes Facebook, you have the ability to do just like a poll or a short survey question. It might be a good starting point just to put a poll up around broadband efforts.
Yeah, that's a good
idea.
idea.
Just a test case.
Besides the community engagement part of the Tilson proposal, Is it just kind of updating their bill of materials and kind of assessment of the streets, or what else would we be getting for that?
Their budget proposal for this was $3,500 to review the prior study, stakeholder coordination for 55 hours for $9,625, demand analysis and community involvement, another 55 hours for another 9,600 plus. Developing a business model planning and financial forecasting, 65 hours for over $11,000. High level infrastructure design and associated cost estimate for 80 hours, $14,000. And then public and private investment strategy, 45 hours for almost 8,000, $7,800 plus dollars. So a total of 320 hours as they have broken it down.
And this would be to kind of help us lay some groundwork for creating a municipal broadband service, essentially.
I think it would include proposals for doing it either through a third party or running it by the town. If I read it correctly, it'd kind of give you some ideas on what might be involved doing it one way versus the other. You know.
And I think you're right, John, that a good portion of this is for after the decision that we want to invest in fiber to the premises throughout the town.
Right. Yeah, I think that would be something that would have to be made before probably you engage them, I think, probably, yeah.
Right. So, you know, I think we keep going back to how bad is it or how good is it? What's the service now? And we've been trying to, we've been trying to push more broadband testing. And I know, Wendell, you put it in the school newsletter and it's probably on the town Facebook page as well. And yet,
I think we got maybe 10 people across Mount Desert to do a test.
and I wonder, because I went and looked at, I've done half a dozen tests myself, and I don't find that they all show up on the broadband map, even though I started with their location.
Takes a little while. Sometimes you have to zoom in and out, and then all of a sudden they'll pop in. It's kind of, the software is a little glitchy, but in general, I think the people who have been testing and the results I've seen tend to be the people who are not super pleased with what they have currently, and which are mostly DSL through copper lines. Those are the results I've seen that are kind of disappointing. The few results I've seen with Spectrum vary a little bit, but they vary based on what plan the person is subscribed to, I think, more than what the service is capable of providing. Because I've seen tests on there from Spectrum that are, you know, close to a gig, and I've seen tests that are 4 or 5 megs, and a lot of that depends on, you know, what the subscriber is paying for.
I will share, because I don't think the last time we met this was possible yet. If you're on the map and you just hit the letter G, you'll get a key. You can search your town, and then it'll narrow in on your town boundaries so that you can kind of focus in on exactly who is within your town lines.
Yeah, I was looking for some way to like download a little spreadsheet or something, but I didn't see anything like that. Maybe they're working on that. But,
yeah, and I can see if I can pull something from the back end, but that's just been helpful for some especially some mainland communities that, you know, don't know exactly where their town line is. It just helps to put a little black line around. So it's just clicking the letter G and it'll pop up. You search for your town and it'll pull you in.
Okay. Yeah, I was zooming into my house. You know, I did several tests from my house on different services, because we actually just use the phone lines, but next door to us, and I can access their Wi-Fi, is on Charter now, and it makes a big difference, you know. But I don't see both of those showing up on the map when I zoom in to almost house level. So
yeah, I'm not sure why, but it doesn't seem to be real time, the updates. Yeah.
But I'm curious about, and think that we would like to engage in almost going door to door, at least on Main Street, and say, okay, let's do a speed test. Let's see how good or bad things are. Because shouldn't we start with that? Was what's available now, and do we need to make changes? Are people satisfied or unsatisfied?
You know, a lot of it is, you know, the little segments of roads that don't have spectrum run down them. And I know we talked at one point that was the underserved portion of the town of Mount Desert. Currently, a lot of little roads that some are private, some are quasi private. You know, they have an association or something like that. Those tend to be the roads that don't have. I mean, there's a couple of people I know that have gotten together on small roads and have agreed to, you know, approach the project on their own. I know there's a couple of summer residents that are going to have conduits buried and run this year so that they can get spectrum run to their house. And the spectrum part of the project is free, but getting the conduits dug and buried is, you know, $80,000. So it's kind of, it can be pricey. It can be pricey to go that way. So, yeah, it's the burying of the conduits. I mean, stringing a wire overhead is not a big deal, and spectrum will do that if you have poles, but these particular locations, of course, don't have poles. So, yeah.
Looking at the Tilson report as our submission as well, I just wanted to flag their timeline is 3 months for the scope of work. And I'm not sure, given the seasonality of your community, if, you know, the timing of that 3 months matters, especially if you want to, with the community engagement process, depending, you know, that you want a full scope of homeowners in your community and not just residents, but seasonal residents as well. So I just wanted to flag that as well. It's a pretty tight timeline in terms of the amount of work that's in here. Even community engagement alone is to do it in 3 months is pretty tight. So I would say when you're balancing this, and if you have the capacity in your own community to take on some of either pieces or entirety of work, starting to timeline out what you might think your own timeline is, and milestones, whether it's around milestones within your community or milestones within the work, is one thing to also consider as well. And I can share a really good timeline that a community in Western Maine pulled together. That it's probably one of the better that I've seen, just around the full scope of work that they were looking at.
It seems like maybe 3 months, that's a good point. Like, is it gonna be really hard? We have to be really ready to execute, to be able to get like a broad coverage of responses within 3 months. Maybe one approach would be we kind of do some preliminary data gathering in an organized way. We determine how deep we want to go if we really want to get every single home in town. I mean, Derlin, how many residences are in the town?
Oh my goodness, you know, you're talking in the thousands probably.
Is it feasible to get every single person? If so, what questions do we ask? It seems like the speed test is kind of hard for us to actually get the data out of it.
Yeah, I don't know if would you really need to get all of them, or could you like sample like a geographic area if you got 1 or 2 that might be sufficient because it would be similar in the other residences? I would think you'd want to cut that down rather than try to get every residence.
Or maybe every street or something along.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a sample in each area, and they've got the same sort of thing, the same pole access, all of that, then you would, you know, if you get 2 or 3 houses, you'd probably have the same data as if you did 15 on that street, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, speeds are pretty consistent with cable or charter based on what you subscribe to. The big variable is the DSL speeds. They can be very, very fast down by Yastaku. When you're close to the central office, you can get a 50 meg account quite nicely, but there's a factor of distance. Once you get over 7,000 or 8,000 feet from that central office, then you're pretty much are in the no service zone. So you could.
Wendell, when we had DSL, they did that study, and before they did that, once they did that over at Asticue Corner, put that node in, then you could see when it dropped off right there, like you said, by Asticue, it was great. By the time you got maybe way over by the elementary school, it had dropped off a lot because you were
Correct.
a mile away.
Correct, yeah, yep,
I also think it's not just the speeds that we need to get a sense of. It's, are you happy? Are you willing to pay more? Or what are you willing to pay? Are you interested in town broadband?
right,
I think we should, if we're going to try to centralize this, we get all the things we might want in one place, and then get at the same time, get your speed, get your interest, get what kind of road you are. Is it a buried line or not? And then if we could kind of collate all of that, then if we do decide to go to Tilson, we can probably if we could like leverage that so that when they're doing their 3-month engagement, they know exactly what they need to do. Or we might say, look, we don't even need to pay you for that because we've already done it. We have this clear understanding.
right,
It
I don't
seems
know.
like wherever Spectrum goes now, there shouldn't be a broadband coverage speed issue. Could be pricing or could be customer service. That's very hard to figure out whether a second network will be better at that. That's a tough one to figure out. But it seems like, you know, I'm a seasonal resident, but in Woods Road and across the street in Northern Neck, Spectrum goes down those roads, and anybody who wants it has it, and it would be the speed that they've subscribed to. And a lot of places where they go, the speed will be fine. The price could be an issue, but you know, it's available for people who want to pay. But there could be places where it's not available. You mentioned some, I think that Wendell, that were you know, people can't really afford to get access if that's been $80,000. So it's long driveways or some
Yeah.
roads maybe, but I don't think it's probably easier to find where is it not than try to figure out where is it.
right,
I would just add to that, John, that it's also, even with Spectrum, it's not necessarily speed, but the reliability of the network that they have. And case of, I am a Spectrum customer, and I often lag and drop calls throughout the day if I've been, because I'm on Zoom all the time. So it's not always speed and affordability are definitely two things, but I would also just add reliability. So the latency issues around that infrastructure. And I think we're seeing people understand that more in this past year, given the high saturation levels on the network throughout the day.
Okay, so fair point. So if there are concerns with people on Zoom constantly and they're seeing drop calls, is that a problem with the local supplier or someplace else in the network? If it is something that Spectrum can control, then going to Spectrum saying you got to upgrade your network is a worthwhile endeavor to go pursue. That doesn't lead to a Tilson study to do a you know, build an alternate network. My point was that those issues of reliability and cost are really hard to figure out with a paper study that therefore we'll spend a few $1 million because we think it might be better. That's a tough argument.
right. You'd see the same kind of bandwidth supply issues with a fiber network that you would, you know, I see it at the various schools, even though we have a 10 gig network feeding all the schools. If, and particularly at a school, we have a limit of 1 gig, and that service, if you get a bunch of people using it, of course, it drops off based on what they're doing. And so that's just the idea of on a municipal level would be the same. If, you know, you can only feed so much bandwidth in, you can only pay for so much bandwidth, and it really depends. The quality of service is based on who's doing what, when, and how many of them are doing it.
Yeah, I better, and I may not express myself clearly. I think it's a worthwhile thing to find out. So
Right.
I was not trying to say it's not worth getting. I do think that's
No.
important to get in the context of Tilson. I'm not sure they're going to add much to that,
Right.
but
Right.
it would be worthwhile to find out for people who have it, are they satisfied? And if not, what exactly are they not satisfied about?
Right.
That's a fair point.
And it may take about a year if you think about like the different seasonalities of the residents. We'd have to kind of get something in structure in place, have it throughout the summer season in a way that they can discover it, or we can engage with them, get those answers, and then the fall, and then the winter. So it might take a long time to actually get a complete picture, but it seems like we're still grappling with the larger questions of, do we approach the concept of a municipal fiber network? Do we go with spectrum? Do we go after these grants and so on? And so I think a lot of that is predicated on community interest. And so at some point, we've got to get these answers, right?
Correct. Yep.
And we need to make it easy for people to engage and give us the information. So it's got to be quick and simple. And we've seen with town meetings that there are so many more people engaged in town meetings now that we can do it by Zoom. And that a lot of seasonal residents are joining meetings that they never would have been able to come to in the past, you know?
So speaking on behalf of seasonal residents, if I may, I didn't know there was a YouTube, a Facebook page for the town of Mount Desert. Just no. And I looked in that just now. I think it was the right one. And there's a reference. There's no mention of any speed test on that page. So if that's the main portal for engaging the community, town of Mount Desert, the broadband committee might want to talk about putting something on there that will say, do this, we would like to get input from you, or whatever.
Yeah, Derlin, do you know who manages the Facebook page?
You can send it to myself or Jen McQuain.
Yeah.
Either one of us can.
Put that link on there, yeah.
Yeah, can do that, sure.
But I think we would probably want like a Google form or something, so we have an opportunity to answer more questions. And then one of the questions might be, have you done this speed test? If not, click here and do it.
Right.
And then, and then also put in your average speeds, whatever, unless Wendell, you can actually get the data out of that thing.
Yeah, you could ask some questions like, if the town was to have a network and you could get guaranteed X amount of bandwidth, would you pay $50, and would you keep your current service, or would you go with that service? I mean, it would be good to know what percentage of residents would jump ship, so to speak, to get onto another provider if one was available. And there's always going to be people who will just be happy leaving things the way they are. So it kind of depends.
I think we found with the last, we going back years when we collected information via postcards, we sent out a lot of postcards. And in my opinion, speaking as one of the ones who was part of that effort, we didn't ask our questions carefully. There's some thought needs to go into the questions, so I wouldn't want to do it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the responses was clear. We didn't, the person reading the postcard didn't have the same understanding as the person writing it.
Right.
Your broadband access? Sure, I go to the library. I got access.
Yeah.
What do you mean that? Or they answered about cell service. Also some questions we asked, we did nothing with the answer. So why ask the question in the first place? So my thought would be, I like the idea of asking questions more than just the speed test, here's a link. So I think that's a great suggestion. I just would recommend that we put some thought in among ourselves as to what exactly would we want to know, and what will we do with information, just to.
And I do think that postcards, because I was thinking the same thing yourself, it's going out, it could go out to every home, residence, business, et cetera, every PO box, every street address, if you cover the whole town, so you're getting coverage that way. If it's easy for people to send back a postcard with easy answers, postage paid, that might be more effective in getting those things back. It would also reach the people who aren't going online, who don't have a Facebook account, who aren't connected, because those are the people we want to reach anyway, right? Because they're not, but they're not connected.
Right.
So
we would come up with a set of questions and have them online as well as in a mailer, and then we can just do the work of digitizing all the mailer responses, so we have it all in one place.
Right. I mean, in the good old days, you could send people door to door to ask questions, but I don't think we're going to be doing that in the near future anyway.
Right. Well, and that would be an interesting thing. Would you participate in a public meeting or either virtually or
Right,
face to face when that's acceptable
right,
to talk about what you think we need, what we should have, the impact on it? Because we do want to gather stories in terms of why this is important.
right,
If it's not important, if we've got what we need.
right. It might be
Kathy,
interesting.
maybe, I'm sorry, Wendell.
It might be interesting then see how Tilson is planning on engaging community in this day and age. I'd be curious to see what their strategy is for that. You know.
So I'm thinking back, and I apologize, I haven't followed the last, I skipped a meeting or so, but I know that Kathy, you and others have talked a lot about the people who aren't here yet, who you'd like to find out, is there something that we should be doing to encourage people to move to the town of Mount Desert? Or are the future needs different than the present ones? And I know Lily has, active in the real estate community. People like that might be a good source, more than postcards to the existing residents, finding out what are they hearing from prospective buyers and what's out there is one source of information for future needs. And I think it's fair to say of the existing ones, people have stressed the system differently than they have in the past.
Right.
Like Kendra Jo mentioned, people using Zoom, and they might are seeing flaws they wouldn't have seen a year ago.
Correct. We had, when we were in the thick of it at the schools, we had constant problems with kids being dropped out. And it was usually because there were 2 or 3 smart TVs streaming at the same time as parents being online as 3 kids. And there just wasn't the physical bandwidth with even if they had a 200 meg plan with Spectrum to, provide enough bandwidth for all of those simultaneous streams. Yeah.
So finding out who of the current residents doesn't have it at all, might just be a handful. We ought to know what those are and take care of them. Those who do have current residents who have bandwidth and internet access, what don't they like about it? Reliability, dropping out, et cetera, of Zoom calls, and for maybe via the real estate agents, finding out what's the future, what's going on in the state of Maine. People moving out of cities due to COVID, they're learning that they don't have to be in any one spot to work. And so that's awakening in society. And so if you want to entice people to move to a town of Desert, what would they be looking for? And there might be different sources of the information.
Right.
And people like I'm not an early adopter of the latest techniques. So sometimes I'm a good role model for how simple does it have to be before someone like me will even answer the question. And
maybe we'd have a different questionnaire for businesses as well. So that'll be easy to probably get everybody, because that's a tractable number, and there might be different concerns for businesses, like would more speed change some aspect of what you can do and something like that. Right.
And a lot of businesses are locked in with different plans, so they would have to plan for what their contracts are current with, and then how they would grow out of that into something else moving forward if they were so interested.
But Pete made a good point about it's not just future for residents, but is there a business that's saying, I could expand my operations here if I'm not doing that because of X, and so
there's a local architect in town here in Northeast Harbor who has a new person moving from out of state with her husband, and this is exactly what we want to have. It's more people, young people, might have families, get kids into the school system. And it's a technology-based, they're doing architectural plans, and they're going to want to upload all of those plans one place or another, right? I think from an economic development point of view, we would love to have more of a tech-focused, tech-enabled industry here in town that wasn't reliant on the foot traffic of tourists or lots of other people, because they become the traffic for all those other businesses, restaurants and retail, et cetera. So from our point of view, we want more of that. It's also a younger population, good paying jobs, it would be great for our local economy. So we would be very interested in seeing all that happen.
So something to consider is, I know, Kathy, that you work with Mount Desert 365 is potentially hosting a roundtable conversation of businesses so that you can just create conversation around what the future or what they feel the future of their business is specifically in your community and what the limitations or opportunities would be to help them achieve that. It's one way beyond just a paper or online survey to get at that data and to create more of a conversation kind of from the economic standpoint, and have them talk to each other. You can do that easily online. The other is we have several communities that, in order to both inform and seek engagement from just everyday residents, they've been holding broadband informational sessions where they bring in a series of different community partners and models. So one might be kind of that economic conversation with businesses. Another might be bringing in a community, some community representatives from elsewhere that have done a full fiber build versus building out with, fully building out with Spectrum, and what that process looked like, as a way of not only informing this committee, but also taking the opportunity of this virtual setting to make it public and inform. I know you're recording, but it's different between watch this recording versus come and attend this broadband conversation and learn with the committee at the same time. But I think regardless of survey or that, it's really understanding what the clear charge of this committee is. And if you're trying to find, all of the options and present that to the town, or the best option, and really understanding, is it just filling in the gaps, or is it taking that step further and seeing what community investment would get you potentially, and what that cost and timeline might look like.
Kendra Jo, if we were to go the way of a postcard, so going out to people, making it simple for them to respond, have you seen a list of questions? Well, whatever way we put it out there. Do you have from other communities a list of questions that they asked that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, we have a good file of questions that you can kind of pick and choose from. And I can also connect you with Bria, who's on our team that has kind of a more extensive background in surveying, and she can kind of talk through what she has seen when it comes to stronger surveys than others. Always having the online option is always going to be one of the best things. And then utilizing the postcard to be a supplement instead of relying solely on a postcard and then, either not or not having something online. Then you can put it on Facebook, there's a link, and hey, if they didn't fill it out, but then they got a postcard, then, that's fine as a complimentary. But I always think that keeping a very short, direct survey online has been some of our most successful, especially because we aren't seeing the same foot traffic, right? So in the past, I would have said, yes, you should absolutely have a paper survey as well, and make sure there's a box in the survey, a batch of surveys at your library and the local grocery and the town office, where people might be able to take 2 minutes and fill it out and then put it in a box. But we just aren't seeing that same kind of foot traffic. And also just determining what a good response rate would look like for your community, and just preparing yourself for, is that 10%? Is that 5, 15, what you're expecting, so that you can balance your expectations with what your questions are as well.
So I think a lot of suggestions, Kathy, here, that all sound good. As a way of structuring it, it sounds like we are trying to segment the way we get our information. And so everything in business is a 2x2 table. So thinking of it that way, this is the MBA kind of big thoughts, I can't think more than 2x2. So we have a residence row, and we have a business row, and we might approach those differently in gathering information. And we have both sort of the current status column and the future possibility column, it sounds like. So, and we might approach each of those cells a little differently. So things like the Economic Development Corporation or business associations or chamber of commerce like equivalents, whatever those businesses are, or just talking to them in a certain way, could take care of both current and future needs for the business. For residents, I think a lot of the postcard stuff, we might be thinking of that for current residents, but for future, we might want to talk to the real estate people for that. And I think it'd be important for the current people is to figure out who doesn't have it at all. I think it's got to be a small number now. And we just ought to know who that is and just figure out, just if you know, if we're talking about 10 or 20 homes, that's different than trying to figure out, geez, in this huge, vast town, who doesn't have it. I think we probably know a lot who has it. And we ought to just, as a committee, know who doesn't, which road doesn't have it, which long driveway doesn't have it, and you know, figure out, do we do something about that or not? I don't know. What are the options? But for everybody else, it's kind of like, as Kinder Joe mentioned, maybe it's yeah, bandwidth is great, or Wendell mentioned, it's great until X, the busy part of the day, or something happens. And we got to solve that. And that may not be a Tilson or municipal owned network. It might be going to the incumbent first saying, we got a problem here. What are you gonna do to fix it? And show us some data, and they might be responsive to that. I would hate to put out any price point to the community saying, would you like to buy a gigabit for, you know, $50 a month? Everybody says, sure. But if we can't deliver that, it sets an unreasonable expectation that we can't meet. So I think we would be careful with promising any price benefits of an alternative way until we're really sure we can do that. Just personal opinion.
And any question around cost, we usually recommend that you frame it as, or around affordability, you frame it as what is the maximum you're comfortable paying for internet service. Because if you say what would you want to pay, or even if you provide like a multiple choice selection of like, what would you like to pay, they're going to choose the cheapest. But if you ask them what the maximum you're comfortable paying, right? I'd love to pay $20 a month for internet.
Right.
You know, but if you ask me what the maximum I'm comfortable paying, I would probably give you a higher response. And then you can start to see what that affordability range might look like for your community.
Right.
Is there any data that would be available to us to say, where is spectrum now, street by street?
We do have a map from Charter, and I can request a new one from the construction supervisor of their build out that shows where all their drops and what road they have. I think we had one last time when we were working with them, and I'm sure I can certainly request and share with you guys a current one.
Great.
Is there a way we can have an online file store that the committee can access for things like that, like maps and spreadsheets and so on, so we don't have to email things back and forth all the time?
Oh, I can do a shared Google Drive or something like that. I can certainly share documents from my school account easily enough, and we can put a Dropbox in there, or we can use does the town have Dropbox, Sterling?
Not I'm aware of.
They have a, every user at the town has a 1 terabyte OneDrive account.
OneDrive,
So
okay,
That,
yeah,
that could be utilized.
that's just kind of the same thing, yeah, yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So that
But
would
does
work.
everybody else who would use it need to have that same OneDrive kind of account?
I think you can make, can you make a Dropbox within OneDrive for people that don't have the actual domain to be able to put things in, Bob? I'm not 100% sure. I think you should be able to.
You may be able to.
Yeah,
That's a question I haven't been asked, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, we could also do a Dropbox.
basically it's just a link anyway that you get
Right.
sent out to your email, and they can access the folders and
Right.
upload right to them on the web through the
So
web.
yeah, you should be able to put a permissions on that would allow that person to put a file in it, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to coordinate as we're starting to gather all the pieces and put them into one place where we can all grab them and
Yeah.
paste them in. Or...
Good.
I think that's a
Maybe
great
some capabilities too with a web provider. I'm not sure, Daryl, and Jen could probably answer that question. So
Right.
So is that something that one of us can create, or does it have to come from a town employee to create a file? Or
If it's OneDrive, it would have to be set up on a town account,
Right.
such as Derlin's or,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could set up a free Dropbox, but I think it's limited to maybe 5 gigs for the free.
yeah, it's
account, but, yeah.
pretty small.
Yeah.
And I have a Dropbox folder for broadband that I would happily share with everybody here. Just send everybody a link and say you can add to it, edit it if you want to do that.
Is that one you have for yourself or through the
For the
members? Or,
It's for the office, yeah.
I mean, that probably would work fine for this small group. I don't imagine we're going to upload our movies to it.
Well, I'll put all the information we have in there.
Sure.
To have, I mean, our agendas and minutes go to the town office anyway, but I can also put those in there just so anybody
Yeah.
on this committee can have access to it.
Yeah, if you already have that, and it probably would work quite. Are you limited on its size as far as if you had big documents?
It is, but I have lots of unused space on it.
Okay, yeah, we could certainly start there, and if we ran out, we could investigate the other option, I imagine, yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, that would be good. What else? So we had talked about doing a straw poll at the town meeting. Have we moved beyond that to think, let's not do it, let's try these other ways to engage people and get feedback instead?
I think Derlin's talked earlier about the agenda being pretty packed already, but I'm not sure.
The problem is, Kathy, this year, we're gonna be outdoors again at that drive-in, and we're gonna
Right.
have an issue if we've got some controversial things on there, and I'm worried about pushing past darkness, so I'm trying to make it as light as I can.
Right.
So we can get back indoors. If we had to, for some reason, postpone or that meeting to another date, we're gonna be into some trouble, so I'm trying to give myself every break. Hopefully that would not happen.
Yeah.
Let's not load it up with things we don't have to have.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm trying to make it as bare bones as we possibly can.
And Wendell, you had suggested that maybe the high school parking lot at a different time might be available for people to test out a super high-speed connection.
Yeah, we do have each of the schools on the island now. We did receive COVID funds, and we did use to build out outside Wi-Fi access for all the parking areas and ball fields and places like that. So we do have high-powered stadium access Wi-Fi points that cover most of the property, not 100%, but those are available. And most of them are password protected. There's a couple of them. The high school has a guest network, and Trenton does. The other schools don't currently have an open guest network, but if people, email me or want to, I could certainly share the password and then make a temporary account that they can try at certain times. But those connections at the high school are close to 10 gig. The elementary schools are, all a little over a gig. So that's a good idea of what it would feel like anyway.
Those networks throttled at all, Wendell?
Well, they're throttled by the point of the wireless access points going through switches that have limits of the amount of bandwidth, like the Southwest Harbor is limited by a 1 gig connection just because of the hardware can only handle a gig. And of course, it's the firewall can have a total throughput of about 8 gigs across the whole district, but they're not throttled per se. The guest networks are. They're dropped down to 50 megs or something like that, but in the building they're not.
Okay.
And outside typically not. We have 3 or 4 different SSIDs that people log on to, and each one is kind of presents a different bandwidth profile based on the user. But they certainly can try it. It's a good fast connection. It's a good place to go if you have to run an update on your laptop.
Well, so is the high school, which has the fastest speed,
Correct.
does that have a guest access so
Yeah.
you don't need the password?
Correct, yeah. You just have to, when you join it, you have to agree to abide by, the acceptable use policy. And of course, it's filtered. It doesn't let you do bad things.
Okay.
But there's also, you said 50 megabits is for the guest network.
Correct, yeah. And I could, that's a couple of clicks and I can change it. If they wanted more bandwidth or less, I can adjust it. So, yeah.
Well, and we were thinking of this as an opportunity for people who don't have great access at home to see what it's like so that they can say, wow, I had no idea that this was even possible.
Right.
And
Well,
so
most of the schools in Maine, Maine School and Library Network supports and encourages them to have what they call drive-in access. It was very valuable back when a lot of the schools were closed for kids that didn't have anything at home. They can come to the parking lot and do their homework and do their meetings and stuff from the parking lot. So that is being encouraged and built out across the whole state as well. So, yeah.
but if anybody were to go to the parking lot and sign on as a guest, would they have, as you told us the last time, the high school has great speed because they're doing this esports program.
Right, right.
Would I, as a casual user, be able to go and experience that great speed, or?
If I got permission to throttle it up at certain times during the day, of course, we like to have the bandwidth dedicated to the school activities, but I can also change it based on time so that after 5 or something like that, it would open up so that's certainly an option as well. And if it's something the towns want people to experience, then that's certainly something we can do. Yeah.
And even if it was just a one-day thing, not during school time, but on a Saturday, for instance.
Sure. Yeah.
To say, all right, go between these hours on a Saturday and see what it's like from your car.
Yeah, and it's and of course, any kind of Wi-Fi access is variable based on how far you are from the access point, what quality of your equipment you are, and how many other people are on it at the same time. But it's certainly capable of supporting, each of the access points is capable of supporting upward of 100 people. So, yeah.
I can't imagine we'd have 100 people in the parking lot any
No.
given time.
No, probably not. Maybe at the town meeting, but
You might if you forget to throttle that back down.
yeah. Quite popular.
If we were to do this, should we pick a date and get the word out there? If you want to see what this is like, because you don't have it at home, go on this particular date, these hours, and park generally in this part of the parking lot.
Yeah, and try it out and see. Yeah. I've run speed tests with my own laptops from various distances, and when you have an average laptop, which is like a Mac laptop, and you're over by where they play softball, I'm able to get upwards of 150 megs over the Wi-Fi, which is pretty good at 300 yards. So,
Yes.
So it's pretty tolerable.
Are the entrances closer to the gymnasium? Is that the better access?
Yeah, you can see the devices. They're kind of a panel. They're maybe 24 by 18 inches, kind of tan panels. And
On the outside of the building?
Yeah. There's at the high school, there's one by the gym entrance door. There's one by the superintendent's door. There's one by the main entrance door. There's one by the music room door. There's one that faces the stadium. And then there's another one that faces the back ball field. I think there's 6 or 7 outside ones there. So, yeah.
Should
So
we
certainly, yeah, if people want to do that, they just have to let me know, and I'll talk to the administration and make sure I get approval to do it on those specific days or times. Yeah.
Should we set a date now?
Yeah, if it's a matter of getting the information out, sure. Like if you want to, yeah. For people to be able to see. I mean, we could also even loan people a few laptops if they wanted to try it. Some school, we have some extra laptops around. Yeah.
I think that this could be a good event, and it would get people talking about it and maybe engaged and then responding to those other surveys that we want to do, et cetera. So
Right.
it's part of a bigger outreach effort to give people this and
Right.
opportunity to do more publicity about it up front. So
Yeah, MSLN is also increasing bandwidth for all the libraries on the islands as well. Right now, they have 100 meg connections, but those will all be at gig by the end of the summer as well. So, so there'll be greater access, and a lot of the libraries are talking about also providing outside Wi-Fi access.
Because I have to scoot for another meeting.
Thank
But
you so much for your help.
yeah, I've got a couple of things here. I'll probably send right to you, Kathleen, and
that would be great.
in the next few days.
We can put them in the Dropbox.
Send everybody a link to Dropbox, exactly. Okay,
Thank you.
thank
Thank you
you
all.
very much.
Thank you so much.
Take care. So our next meeting would be April 8. Do you think, Wendell, that if you could check and see by the time we meet next, a possibility of doing a speed test at the high school? Or
Sure,
a speed test, but letting people have access to it?
sure, yeah. Basically, that's just a matter of I have a couple clicks to just open up the guest network to a full speed to do that on a particular date and time, and then just turn it back after. So yeah.
And they might be concerned about a particular date, that there's not some other event going on.
Correct,
That's gonna be
correct, yeah.
people showing up, or
Yeah,
driver's ed or whatever, so
Sure, yeah.
graduation.
Yeah, I think I know what, for the various town meetings, when we've had them in the past, I've throttled it up just to allow people to, use their devices in their cars if they need to, or check Facebook or do things.
Great, okay. Well, you can let us know when the high school would allow us to do that.
Sure, yeah, I'll check their calendar, talk to the powers that be. Myself being one of them, I guess, I have a conversation with myself.
You're always talking to yourself anyway, right? So,
Oh, my goodness.
okay. So should we get back to Tilson Technologies on anything at this point, other than saying, hold off, we're not going to engage you right now. We want to do some of our own work up front?
I think probably we need a little bit of that prep work done first, I think, before we jump in with $50,000 probably, but
They
I
do
don't know.
have a community involvement piece. It's 9,600 there. It sounds pretty comprehensive. I don't know if it's worth
Maybe that could be something we do.
worth discussing with them, but
Yeah,
because they do this type of thing quite a bit. So
Yeah.
they may
Yeah.
know some of the best routes that's worked with other towns. Not that it'll work
yeah,
with Mount Desert, but I think in
Yeah.
talking and correspondence, you might be able to get some free consulting even.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe would it be worth? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, free I like. As we discussed, there's different kinds of questions we like to ask, and I guess finding out like what do they think if they're taking like a desert start approach, and as Kinder Joe said, it's if they're assuming we do nothing, I'd be more likely to respond to a town committee than I would be from somebody from outside.
Right.
I limited ability to go vet every email that comes across my desk or every contact phone call, and
Right.
I'd respond more to a neighbor than I would to somebody else. So I'm not
Right.
opposed to it, Bob. I think it's good to find out, but I like the idea of there's a certain amount we can do on our own and find out what a fair question that Bob raises. What would they do beyond what we could do ourselves? What
Right.
value would they add?
Well, maybe they could even, maybe they could have a package they could kind of make a good set of concrete suggestions on how we should proceed, and they could maybe help organize that a little bit. I don't know. But,
Well, the interesting thing was when we first started talking, my first conversation with Kendra Joe at the Island Institute was looking for advice on consultants we might work with if we want to bring this along, thinking we've
Right.
got the Tilson report. What would it cost to build out what they have already recommended, but the contract that concluded with their report in 2015? What would it cost to do it? Because we know that there have been times when they might have overestimated the cost, and costs have changed and technologies have changed and the cost of fiber is coming down, et cetera. So should we go out to bid? on the plan that they had already designed for us or recommended. And so we wanted to talk about consultants. Whom should we ask for that kind of help? And her response was, well, we always recommend you start off with community engagement first.
Right.
That's what they do with every town, and they're there to help us along the way. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
now why do we want to go out and bring somebody else in to do community engagement? So, and pay them to do it when Island Institute would be doing it for free with us.
Right, right.
So I'm sort of torn between, yeah, they do this a lot. They have special platforms to do this. I'd like to know more about what that looks like, maybe see a demo of it, and
Right, right.
what
Yeah,
exactly do they do?
yeah, it's good to have know
Yeah.
all the options for sure. Yeah, yeah,
That would be interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from other communities how that worked for them, because as you said, they do this a lot and they do it all over the country. So
Yeah.
what does that look like? How does that work? And would it work here for this community? Because,
And they're based in Portland, right? Are they? Yeah.
yes, yep.
Portland, yeah.
And they have grown tremendously since
Yeah.
they did that work for us. You know,
Yeah.
in the last 5 years, they
Yeah.
have expanded to be across the country. So,
Yeah.
Well, I'll get back and ask more questions from them. And
Right.
we'll get some more information from Kendra on sample questions that they've asked in other places. We'll get some information on the town's Facebook page about doing more speed tests.
Yeah, that would be great.
Um,
I'll check into the full speed bandwidth surfing day.
Okay. And I'll send out a Dropbox link so we can start to gather some of this information, and I'll put all of these documents in there.
Right, I'll ask Spectrum Charter's construction coordinator if he can forward me a current PDF of their plant, what it looks like.
That would be great. For Charter. That-
Charter, yeah. Charter is the real company. I guess Spectrum is kind of their consumer front end version, I guess it's.
I think,
Okay.
Kathy, we'll wait for Kendra Joe to give us some example questions, and then we can start our questionnaire from that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Google Form is a good way to do that.
Yeah. And then we can just start having a spreadsheet in the cloud and just collating all the information.
Yep.
I have one kind of unrelated question. Derlin, a couple months ago, you mentioned that you might bring up the idea of crosstown engagement at the I forget what it's called, the meeting of the minds.
League of Towns,
League of Towns.
Yeah.
Did you have that opportunity?
we haven't done anything with it yet, Pete, but yes, it certainly is. I know we bounce back and forth about, broadband sharing back and forth, and each community had such different needs, and we're at such a different place. Bar Harbor seemed to be the most logical partner that we'd be able to work with. Tremont and Southwest are sort of in a different place at this moment.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure there may be some
Yeah.
engagement opportunities there. So we'll
Right.
continue
And
to-
there's no real contract any of the towns have with Charter or Spectrum currently, right? I don't
I'm
think
just
so.
wondering, as we design the questionnaire and the community approach, does it make sense to look at, should we just, is it an incremental increase, or working with like the town of Southwest to just send the postcards there as well? Clearly sending the link around, there's no additional cost. We can just ask what town do you belong to, or what's your address.
Right.
Maybe that would be helpful for other towns, or it might be helpful for our own purposes if we can say, okay, like we have this engagement in Town of Mount Desert, we're seeing equal interest in these other towns.
Right.
So maybe that's something that we want to just consider when we're designing the questionnaire. Is this just for our town? Is there a big amount of effort to expand just the questions that may make it relevant for the other towns?
Right.
Or if that loses focus, maybe that's not something we want to do.
Right.
Well,
That'll be-
once we develop a set of questions, for our questionnaire and figure out how we might get it out, I don't think we have to claim ownership and proprietary,
Right.
a cone of silence over it. Why not share that? And if the League of Towns is the right one to say, here's what we're doing on this, feel free to use these same questions if you think they're going to work for your community. And
Right.
let's compare notes at the end. Or, if we're going to if there's going to be some cost to mailing it out, which there would be, I don't know that we would want to bear that cost for every town on the island or every town in the League of Towns, but sharing the information of what we might be doing might spur them to do the same thing if
Right.
the legwork was up there. So
I mean, it'd be interesting to see how the whole connection between Bar Harbor and the town of Mount Desert works with this fiber thing. That would be kind of a good model for other towns to investigate. Yeah.
yeah, what did we share the Casco report on?
Yeah.
That,
I think I looked it over. Yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
and that seems like a reasonable amount of money. It's not in the millions, but
No, it seems reasonable. I'm not sure if Bob knows, but there's no way to use existing dark fiber. You have to really own your own fiber, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise
you have to, because you're really just talking about a network cable from one network to another, so.
Right, because we do have existing dark fiber, like at the town, like at the school. I have a cable was run when Adelphia, and there's 10 dark fibers that run from there to the high school. Currently, I'm only using one. So
That's Spectrum owned though, right?
it's Spectrum owned, but it's not being used, and we use it free. There's never been a cost involved, so I don't know why they would not let other people use it. I don't know. It's just I don't know how you'd even broach that question without creating a can of worms, I guess.
Yeah, it may not come out favorable for you.
Right. Well, I mean, the other thing, Maine School and Library Network has always said that if Spectrum or Charter ever decided to start charging for that they would negotiate on our behalf and cover that for the schools. But of course, that wouldn't be the case for the town. But I'm just curious, what does it cost to lease dark fiber? I did a little looking online, and it varies from anywhere from $20 a month to $10,000 a month. It's way all over the chart. So I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of, some of it's based on by mile, some of it's based on other things. So I don't know. I think probably in the long term it is cheaper to own your own stuff. So of course you do have to maintain it then and roll the truck if the tree falls.
That's correct. Yeah. Pros and cons with everything.
Right.
on that Casco report, it went to the corner of Route 3
Eagle Lake Road.
Eagle Lake Road, but not all the way to the high school. Is Bar Harbor planning to come down to that point? I thought they were only going to the high school.
Yeah, I'm a little confusion on that point. I'm not 100% sure. On
they're the same consultant that's working with Bar Harbor,
Right.
and their proposal to the town was that they would design and implement a fiber interconnect there.
Yeah.
And so since they're aware of everything, I'm assuming that they know where
What they're doing.
endpoints and terminations need to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
it would be nice to have a piece of fiber running to the high school, because the one we have is the most tenuous one currently, going from the high school back to Emerson School. It's the one that gives us the most trouble. So it'd be nice to have something that was fresh and new for that link. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good branching off point for the backside as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can get it through Soamesville.
Right. I mean, we have fiber at the high school that we have one fiber that comes straight from the town office in Bar Harbor. That's our 10 gig link. And then it links back out from the high school to each of the schools. And in Southwest, it serves the town and the police department there, and then splits to go to Pemmitic and Tremont. So they get their internet free through Maine School and Library Network for the graciousness of hosting that interconnect switch there.
Okay. Well, that's it on our agenda, unless anybody has some other such business properly become before this meeting.
Thank you for your excellent work. And Scott will be proud of you.
Nobody has anything more to add? Question, anything else? I think we've got some good things on our to-do list. So
Yeah, sounds good. I'll make a couple of calls and see if I can get that stuff done in the next couple of weeks.
okay, great.
Thank you very much.
So next meeting, April 8th. Thank you.
All right.
Everyone.
Have a good night.
Take care, you too.
Thank you, Dick.